The moment we crossed the threshold into Darlene's immaculate foyer, the air felt thinner, like oxygen was a luxury she rationed for obedient guests. My stomach twisted into a hard knot I had been ignoring since we left the city. Beside me, my husband stiffened, and our 8-year-old son, Owen, went quiet. We were here to play our parts in her perfect family pageant, but as Darlene's sharp gaze swept over us, I realized this Thanksgiving was not about gratitude. It was an ambush. The gravel crunching beneath our tires sounded like bones breaking. It was a morbid thought, I knew. But as we turned into the driveway of the sprawling colonial house in Briar Glen, my imagination always took a turn toward the catastrophic. The house loomed ahead, pristine and white, standing against the gray November sky like a fortress of judgment. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life, the hedges shaped into unnatural, geometric perfection, and the windows gleamed so brightly they seemed to glare at us. Ethan shifted the car into park and killed the engine. The silence that filled the cabin was heavy. In the back seat, my 8-year-old son, Owen, clicked off his tablet, the sudden quiet making the knot in my stomach tighten. You can do this. Hazel, I told myself, it is just one afternoon. It is just turkey and passive aggression. We have a plan. I looked over at Ethan. He was gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw set in a hard line. He looked less like a man visiting his mother and more like a soldier preparing to cross into enemy territory. He had spent the last 10 years trying to convince me, and perhaps himself, that Darlene Crowley was just particular, just old-fashioned, just lonely. But last year, when she had reorganized my entire pantry while babysitting because my system made no sense, the excuse had finally worn thin. "Hey," I said, reaching out to touch his arm. My voice sounded calm, practiced. "Remember the deal? We stay polite. We do not take the bait. We are on the road by 7 o'clock. Ethan let out a breath that fogged the window. "I know. I just want today to be good. She's been calling me all week about how perfect everything needs to be. It is going to be fine." I lied. "Mom?" Owen piped up from the back, clutching the pie carrier on his lap. "Can I carry the dessert in?" I made the crust. I turned to look at him, his face full of innocent pride. We had spent 4 hours yesterday making that apple pie. He had measured the flour and cut the butter, his small hands working the dough until it was just right. It was a rustic, messy, beautiful thing, bubbling with cinnamon and love. "Of course you can, sweetie," I said. "Grandma is going to love it." We stepped out into the biting wind. I smoothed down my coat, checking my reflection in the side mirror. I looked put together. I looked like a capable 33-year-old woman with a career and a mortgage and a life that did not require approval. But as we walked up the brick path, I felt that familiar regression, that shrinking sensation that only happened here. The front door swung open before we even reached the welcome mat. Darlene stood in the frame, wearing a cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal and dark trousers that held a razor-sharp crease. Her hair was a stiff, golden helmet, sprayed into submission. She looked impeccable. She looked expensive. She looked like she had been standing there for an hour, waiting for us to make a mistake. "Ethan!" she cried out, bypassing me entirely to wrap her arms around her son. She squeezed him tight, rocking him back and forth. "Oh, look at you. You look thin. Is the city eating you alive? I told you that commute would age you." "We are good, Mom," Ethan said, patting her back awkwardly. "We are doing great." Darlene pulled back, holding him at arm's length, scanning his face for cracks. Then her eyes dropped to Owen. "And there is my grandson," she cooed, bending down but not quite touching him, as if she were inspecting a museum exhibit. "Look at those nice manners, standing so still. It is such a relief to see. I always worry that without a yard to run in, boys get so wild. It is nice to see he can be civilized." The compliment landed like a paper cut. It was sweet on the surface, but underneath was the implication. My home was a cage, and my son was feral unless tamed. "Hi, Grandma," Owen said, smiling. "Hello." "Darlene," I said, forcing a smile that made my cheeks ache. "You look lovely." Her blue eyes finally flicked to me. They were cool, detached, like she was surprised to find me there. "Hazel," she said, "you made it." "We did." She tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over my outfit, lingering on my boots, then my hair. "You look comfortable." "I suppose that is important when you are juggling so much. Are you still trying to work those long hours?" "I work normal hours." "Darlene," I said, keeping my voice level. "Well, you look tired," she said with a sympathetic pout. "But come in. Come in out of the cold. The house is warm." At least, we stepped inside. The scent hit me first. Sage, expensive wax, and the chemical bite of bleach. It did not smell like food. It smelled like a showroom. The entryway was grand, with a polished staircase curving up to the second floor. Everything was beige and cream and white. I was always terrified Owen would touch a wall and leave a smudge, a permanent record of our existence in her pristine world. As Ethan helped Owen with his coat, I wandered toward the living room. Darlene had always treated her home decor as a projection of her status. But today, something felt different. The room was staged with military precision. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases, perfectly symmetrical. The throw pillows were chopped in the middle to create that distinct V shape found in interior design magazines. I walked to the mantelpiece. Usually, it was cluttered with framed photos, graduations, weddings, birthdays. Today, the arrangement was sparse. I looked closer. There was a photo of Ethan from high school, looking young and unburdened. There was a photo of Owen from last Christmas, sitting on Santa's lap. There was a photo of Darlene and her late husband. And then there was the family portrait we had taken 2 years ago at the beach. I stared at it. It was in a new frame, a heavy silver thing with thick borders. In the original photo, we were all standing by the dunes, Ethan, me, Owen, and Darlene, but in this frame, the matting was cut aggressively narrow. Ethan, Darlene, and Owen were centered. I was there, but only partially. My shoulder was visible, a slice of my hair, half of my arm, but my face? My face had been cropped out by the silver border. I felt a cold flush creeping up my neck. It was subtle enough that she could claim it was just a bad fit, just the wrong size frame, but I knew it was a visual edit, a rewriting of the family narrative where I was merely a bystander, an accessory that could be trimmed away to focus on the core trio. "Hazel?" I jumped. Darlene was standing right behind me. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice dripping with innocence. I turned, blocking the photo with my body. "No, everything looks beautiful. You have rearranged—" "Oh, just freshening up," she said, waving a hand airily, simplifying. "I think clutter distracts from what is important. Do you not agree?" I swallowed the sting. I swallowed the urge to ask why my face was considered clutter. "Yes," I said. "Less is more." "Come," she said, turning on her heel. "We have a guest. I want you to meet Maris." I followed her into the sitting room, where a woman I did not recognize was perched on the edge of a cream love seat. She looked to be in her late 50s, with dyed auburn hair and glasses that magnified her eyes, giving her a perpetually startled, observant look. She held a teacup with both hands, her posture rigid. "Maris, this is Ethan's wife, Hazel," Darlene announced, "and this is Maris Bexley. She joined our church committee last month. She has been such a godsend with the charity drive." Maris set her cup down slowly, her gaze locking onto me with an intensity that felt invasive. It wasn't a friendly look. It was an assessment. She looked at me the way an underwriter looks at a high-risk loan application. "It is so nice to meet you," Maris said. Her voice was scratchy, low. "Darlene talks about you often. I bet she does." I thought, "Nice to meet you too," I said. Maris patted the spot next to her. "Sit for a moment, dear. Darlene was just telling me about your job." "You are in marketing?" "Project management," I corrected, sitting down. "Right," Maris said. "High stress. I imagine. It can be—" "And you are doing that full-time?" she asked, leaning in. "With a child at home?" Owen is in school, I said, feeling my defenses rise. And he is 8. He is not exactly a baby. Still, Maris said, shaking her head sadly, that must be hard, to be away from him, to miss those moments, I always say. You cannot get these years back. Once they are gone, they are gone. She said it with a pity that felt rehearsed. I glanced at Darlene. She was standing by the window, adjusting a curtain, pretending not to listen, but I saw the slight tension in her shoulders. She was listening to every word. This was a tag team match, and I had just been tagged in. We make it work, I said firmly. Ethan and I are a good team, Maris hummed, a non-committal sound that suggested she doubted that very much. Well, I admire your stamina. I do not think I could have handled the guilt. But women today are built differently, I suppose. I stood up. I was not going to do this. I was not going to let a stranger dissect my life choices 5 minutes after I walked in the door. I should go check on Owen. I said, I found Owen in the kitchen. He was standing near the island, still holding the pie carrier. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, but it was a quiet, tense flurry. My sister-in-law, Tessa, was at the counter, chopping celery with a force that seemed excessive. Tessa was Ethan's younger sister, a woman who had spent her life trying to be invisible to avoid Darlene's radar. She looked tired, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. Hey, Tess, I said. Tessa jumped, dropping the knife. God, Hazel, you scared me. Sorry, she exhaled, wiping her hands on a towel. She came around the island and gave me a quick, hard hug. It was not a warm hug. It was a clingy one, like she was holding on to a life raft. I am glad you guys are here, she whispered into my ear. Seriously, is everything okay? I asked, pulling back to look at her. She glanced toward the doorway to ensure we were alone. She has been emotional all week, worse than usual. Just watch your step today, okay? Why? What is going on? Tessa shook her head, her eyes wide and anxious. I do not know exactly. She just keeps saying that so much depends on today. She is obsessing over every detail. She threw out a whole batch of cranberry sauce this morning because it was too tart. Just, do not engage, please, before I could press her. Darlene swept into the kitchen, Maris trailing behind her like a shadow. And here is the chef, Darlene announced, clapping her hands together, though her eyes were cold. Owen, sweetie, what is that you are holding? The pie, Owen said, lifting the carrier. I made it. Me and Mom. It is apple. Darlene froze. She looked at the plastic carrier as if Owen were holding a dead animal. Oh, she said. That is sweet. I made the crust, Owen said, his enthusiasm starting to wobble under her stare. Well, isn't that nice? Darlene said. She took the carrier from him, holding it by the very tips of her fingers. Homemade. How rustic. She walked over to the counter, where a beautiful glossy tiered cake stand was already waiting. On it sat a perfect, store-bought pumpkin cheesecake, decorated with intricate chocolate leaves. It looked flawless. It looked manufactured. Next to it, there was a handwritten card that read, Grandma's special recipe. We will just pop this in the back, Darlene said, marching Owen's pie toward the pantry. For later, if anyone is still hungry after the main dessert, but I wanted everyone to try it. Owen said, his voice small. And they might, Darlene called out from the pantry. But we have a menu. Sweetie, we have a plan. We cannot just disrupt the flow, can we? She emerged from the pantry without the pie. It was gone, hidden, replaced by the store-bought perfection that she would claim as her own. I felt a surge of heat in my chest. It was such a small thing. A pie. But it was not about the pie. It was about erasure. It was about taking something my son was proud of and shoving it in a dark corner because it did not fit her aesthetic. Darlene, I said, keeping my voice light but firm. Owen worked really hard on that. Maybe we can serve it alongside the cheesecake? Darlene laughed. It was a brittle, Tinkling sound. Oh, Hazel, do not be sensitive. The table is already set. There is no room for clutter. Besides, we want to give him something to look forward to for leftovers, right? She turned her back on me, effectively ending the conversation. Maris, dear, hand me that serving platter. I looked at Owen. He was staring at his shoes. His shoulders slumped. I knelt down next to him, turning him away from his grandmother. I am proud of that pie, I whispered, and we are going to eat a huge piece of it later. Okay? Okay, he whispered back. Why do you not go find Dad? I think he is setting up the TV for the parade. Owen nodded and scurried out of the kitchen. Eager to escape, I stood up. Taking a deep breath, I needed to do something with my hands before I strangled someone. Can I help with the table? I asked. Darlene did not turn around. You can put the water glasses out, but use the crystal, not the everyday glass, and check them for spots. I do not want spots. I grabbed the tray of heavy crystal goblets and headed for the dining room. The dining room was connected to the kitchen by a swinging door, and the pass-through window was slightly ajar. I set the tray down on the sideboard and began placing the glasses on the perfectly ironed tablecloth. The voices floated through the pass-through window. They were hushed, urgent. Worry about her, Darlene was saying. Her voice was low, devoid of the performance she put on for the room. She is unstable. Maris. You see how she is? Challenging me about a pie? It is pathological. I froze, a glass hovering in my hand. She seems determined, Maris replied. Her voice sounded different now, less judgmental, more clinical. She is controlling. Darlene hissed. That is what she is. She isolates him. He used to be so close to us. Now? I barely know my own son. I have to protect the family. Maris, that is why I need the legal advice. If things go the way I think they might, I need to be ready. Legal advice? My heart hammered against my ribs. What was she talking about? Divorce? Custody? You said the paperwork is ready? Maris asked. It is in the study, Darlene said. I just need him to sign. He trusts me. He will sign if I frame it right. It is for his own good. I am protecting his assets. She will bleed him dry if I do not step in. I set the glass down. My hand was shaking. This was not just holiday drama. This was a plot. She was talking about legal documents. She was talking about getting Ethan to sign something behind my back. I walked back into the kitchen. My face flushed. The conversation stopped instantly. Darlene was suddenly very busy arranging carrot sticks. Maris was studying the label on a wine bottle. I needed to find Ethan. I found him in the den, staring blankly at the football game. He looked relaxed, a beer in his hand, oblivious to the fact that his mother was in the next room plotting to dismantle his marriage. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice low. He looked up, smiling. Hey, you surviving? We need to talk. He frowned, sitting up straighter. What is it? I just heard your mother talking to that woman. Maris, Ethan, she was talking about legal advice. She said she has paperwork for you to sign. Something about protecting assets. Ethan laughed. He actually laughed. Hazel, come on. You are hearing things. I am not hearing things. I snapped. I heard her. She said she needs you to sign something today. She said I am controlling and unstable. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, she is dramatic. You know that. She probably means the insurance updates for the cabin or something. She mentioned she needed help with some filing. She is getting older. Hazel, she worries about money. It did not sound like insurance. Ethan, she said she needs to protect you from me. He stood up, looking annoyed now. Why do you always do this? Do what? Look for the villain. She is my mother. She can be a lot. I know. But she is not plotting against us. She loves us. She is just intense. Can you please just try to relax? For me? I looked at him. I saw the fatigue in his eyes, the desperate desire for this to be a normal family gathering. He was so conditioned to minimize her behavior, to explain it away as love, that he could not see the knife until it was already in his back. But then, I saw something else. Over his shoulder, in the reflection of the hallway mirror, I saw Tessa walking by. She paused, catching Ethan's eye. They exchanged a look. It was brief, a fraction of a second, but it was loaded. Ethan's eyes tightened. Tessa gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He knew something, or at least, he suspected something. Fine, I said, backing down. I did not want to fight him, if I fought him. I pushed him toward her. I will relax, but if she hands you a pen, you do not sign anything. Promise me. I promise, he said, kissing my forehead. You are paranoid. But I love you. I walked away. But the knot in my stomach had turned into a boulder. I went back to the dining room to finish the table. The guests would be arriving soon. I could hear cars pulling up the long driveway. Darlene came in to inspect my work. She walked around the table, her eyes scanning for imperfections. She stopped at the place setting I had arranged for Owen. I had put the fork on the left, the knife and spoon on the right, just like the others. She clicked her tongue. What? I asked. She is too young for the crystal. She said, he will break it. He is 8. Darlene, he drinks from glass at home. Well, this is not your home, is it? She said sweetly. She picked up the crystal goblet and replaced it with a plastic tumbler. A sippy cup, essentially. It was bright red and had a cartoon bear on it. It was for a toddler. Darlene, that is ridiculous. He's going to be embarrassed. Better embarrassed than bleeding, she said. Children need boundaries. Hazel, they need to know their place. You let him run wild. Treat him like a little adult. It creates confusion. He needs discipline, structure. She placed the plastic cup down with a sharp thud. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the crystal goblet against the wall and watch it shatter just to prove her point about chaos. But I looked at the door. I saw Owen peeking in, watching us. He looked anxious. He was gauging the temperature of the room, seeing if it was safe, if I fought her now. Over a cup, I would create a scene. I would make Owen the center of a conflict. He would feel like he caused it. I took a breath. I imagined a cool blue wall rising up around me. You are right, Darlene, I said, my voice flat. It is your house. She looked disappointed. She wanted the fight. She wanted me to yell so she could look at Maris and say, see? Unstable? I picked up the plastic cup. I will just let Owen know so he is not surprised. I walked over to Owen. I knelt down, putting my back to Darlene. Hey, buddy, I whispered. Grandma is really worried about her fancy glasses. So you get the special red cup today. It is the indestructible cup, like a superhero cup. Owen looked at the cup, then at me. He understood. He was 8, but he was smart. Okay, Mom, he whispered. It is just a cup. I smiled at him, my heart aching with love for this brave, resilient boy. It is just a cup. I agreed. I stood up and turned back to Darlene. She was watching us. Her lips pursed in a thin, white line. She had won the battle of the cup, but she had lost the reaction. The doorbell rang. Showtime, Darlene said, smoothing her skirt. Try to smile. Hazel, we have guests. She walked past me, leaving a trail of cold air in her wake. I watched her go, realizing that the real performance was just beginning, and I had a feeling that by the end of the night, the script was going to change in ways she never imagined. I checked my watch. 4 hours until we could leave. I could do this. I had to do this. But as I walked toward the foyer to greet the strangers who were about to fill the house, the words I had overheard in the kitchen echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Protecting assets, legal advice, unstable. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a trap. And I had walked my family right into the center of it. I straightened my spine, put on my own mask, and followed her into the fray. The doorbell chimed again, a rich melodic sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. It signaled the arrival of the audience for Darlene's grand performance. I stood by the entryway, my hand resting protectively on Owen's shoulder, as the house began to fill with people who felt less like family and more like cast members. First came Kent Crowley, Darlene's younger brother. He was a large man with a flushed face and a booming laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. His wife, Barbara, trailed behind him, looking perpetually anxious, clutching a casserole dish as if it were a shield. They greeted Darlene with a deference that bordered on reverence, kissing her cheek and murmuring about how lovely the house looked. Then came the neighbors, the Millers, a couple who had lived next door for 30 years and seemed to function as a Greek chorus for whatever drama Darlene was orchestrating. But it was the final guest who made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Rory Weller walked in, shaking the rain off a long trench coat. I recognized him immediately. He was a local councilman, a man whose face was plastered on election signs every other November. He had that practiced politician's smile, teeth gleaming, hand extended before he even made eye contact. "Rory!" Darlene exclaimed, her voice pitching up an octave. "I am so honored you could make it. I know how busy the council keeps you. I just wanted to stop by and pay my respects to the backbone of this community," Rory said, his voice smooth as oil. I glanced at Ethan. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. This was not a cozy family Thanksgiving. You did not invite a local politician to a family dinner unless you were trying to leverage something. The air in the room shifted. It became stiffer, more formal. We were no longer guests. We were constituents. We were props in a tableau meant to demonstrate Darlene's social standing. "Come, everyone into the living room," Darlene commanded, herding us like livestock. "We must start with our gratitude circle before the appetizers. It is tradition." The living room was suffocatingly warm. The fireplace was roaring, likely for ambiance rather than necessity, and the scent of cinnamon pine cones was overpowering. Darlene arranged us in a loose circle. She stood in the center, hands clasped, acting the part of the benevolent matriarch. "I want everyone to share one thing they are thankful for," Darlene said, her eyes sweeping the room. "But let us dig deep. Let us speak from the heart." She started with Rory, naturally. He gave a polished speech about community and service. Then Kent, who mumbled about health and golf. The circle moved clockwise, bypassing me entirely as Darlene deftly skipped over where I stood to point at Barbara. When it came to Ethan, he cleared his throat. "I am thankful for my family," he said, his voice tight, "for Hazel and Owen, and for being here." Darlene smiled, but it was a tight, pained expression, short and sweet. She said. Then she looked at Owen. "And you, young man?" Owen looked up, clutching his plastic red cup. "I am thankful for my Lego set," he said, causing a ripple of polite laughter. "And I am thankful that Mom might get that new job in Chicago so we can have a big apartment." The room went dead silent. The laughter evaporated instantly. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a potential opportunity, something we had discussed privately at the dinner table 3 nights ago. We had not committed to it. We certainly had not announced it. Darlene slowly turned her head toward me. The movement was predatory. "Chicago?" she repeated. The word hung in the air like a curse. "It is just an interview." "Darlene," I said quickly, trying to diffuse the tension. "Nothing is decided." She looked at Rory, then at the Millers, her eyes wide with performative shock. "I see," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "So you are planning to take Ethan away from his roots, away from his family." "I am not taking anyone away," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the racing of my heart. "We are just looking at options for my career." "Of course," Darlene said, placing a hand on her chest. "Your career, it is always the priority, isn't it? I worry about Ethan. He is a small-town boy at heart. The city eats people up, but I suppose if that is what you want." "He has no choice." She didn't yell. She didn't scowl. She just planted the seed. That I was the selfish career woman dragging her son away from the idyllic life she offered. I saw Barbara exchange a look with Maris. I saw Rory Weller study me with a newfound skepticism. The narrative was taking hold. Darlene clapped her hands, shattering the moment. "Well, Hazel, you go last. What are you thankful for?" The trap was shut. If I defended myself, I looked defensive. If I said nothing, I looked guilty. All eyes were on me. I could feel the weight of their judgment, heavy and tangible. I am thankful for my son's honesty. I said, staring directly at Darlene, and for the resilience of my family. There was a beat of silence. Darlene's eyes narrowed. Just a fraction. How nice, she said, turning away. Now, appetizers are in the sunroom. The group dispersed, the tension dissipating into chatter. But the damage was done. I felt branded as the noise level in the sunroom rose, amplified by the hard tile floors and the alcohol that was now flowing freely. I watched Owen. He was standing near the cheese platter, looking small and overwhelmed. He had his hands over his ears, a self-soothing gesture he used when the sensory input got too high. The laughter, the clinking glass, the booming voice of Kent Crowley. It was too much for him. I walked over and touched his back. Too loud? I whispered. He nodded, his eyes watering. Let's take a break, I said. We can go find a quiet spot for 5 minutes. I took his hand and led him toward the hallway, but as we reached the archway, Darlene stepped in front of us. She didn't move to the side. She blocked the path physically. Where are you going? She asked. Owen needs a break. I said, It is a little loud in here. A break? She scoffed. He has been here for 40 minutes. He needs to learn to socialize. He cannot just run away when things get adult. He is 8. Darlene, he is overstimulated. He is coddled, she corrected, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Look at him, Hazel, cowering because of a little conversation. He needs to toughen up. He needs to go back in there and sit like a young man. Owen shrank against my leg. I felt a flash of white-hot anger, but I remembered the eyes on us. Rory was watching from across the room. Maris was craning her neck. I did not argue. I did not try to explain sensory processing to a woman who viewed emotions as weakness. Instead, I knelt down. I ignored Darlene completely. I turned my body so I was facing my son, creating a small, private wall between him and his grandmother. I looked him in the eye. Owen, look at me, I said softly. He looked up. You have a choice, I said calmly. We can go get a glass of cold water in the kitchen. We can go sit in the car for 5 minutes of silence. Or you can stay here, and we can find a corner to play a game on my phone. What sounds good to you? I waited. I gave him the power. The car. He whispered. Okay, I said. The car it is. I stood up and took his hand. I looked at Darlene. We will be back in 5 minutes. Darlene's face was a mask of frustration. I had not fought her. I had not been unstable. I had been a parent, and by ignoring her command to force him to submit, I had shown her that her authority did not extend to my child. You are making him soft, she hissed as I walked past. I kept walking. We sat in the car for 10 minutes. The silence was blissful. Owen took deep breaths, the color returning to his cheeks. I let him play a game on my phone while I stared at the dashboard, trying to slow my own heart rate. When we went back inside, Owen was ready. He rejoined the party, finding a spot near Ethan. I headed toward the kitchen to get a glass of water, my throat dry from the suppressed screaming I wanted to do. The kitchen was empty, or so I thought. I turned the corner and nearly collided with Tessa. She was standing by the refrigerator, holding a bottle of white wine, looking pale. Hazel, she whispered, grabbing my arm. What? What is it? She pulled me deeper into the pantry, out of sight of the doorway. I heard them talking earlier, she said, her voice shaking. Before you got here, Darlene and Maris, and Kent, talking about what? About you? Hazel? Tessa's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and apology. She has been telling people, God, she has been telling people you are mentally unstable, that you have outbursts, that you are controlling Ethan's finances and isolating him from the family. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Unstable? Me? I was the one holding everything together. Why would she say that? I asked, my voice barely audible. To build a case? Tessa said. She kept saying she needs to protect Ethan's assets. She thinks if you get that job in Chicago, You are going to file for divorce and take everything. She is terrified of losing control over him. She wants people to think you are the problem, so if she tries to intervene legally, she has witnesses. My mind raced back to the conversation I had overheard earlier. Legal advice, protecting the family. It wasn't just idle gossip, it was a strategic campaign. She was poisoning the well. And the assets? I asked. What assets? We have a mortgage and 2 car payments. We are not exactly wealthy. I do not know. Tessa said. But she has folders. In the study, I saw them on her desk. She was showing Kent something in them. Thank you. Tessa, I said, squeezing her arm. I left the kitchen, but I did not go back to the party. I needed to see those folders. The study was down the hall, past the guest bathroom. The door was slightly ajar. I checked the corridor. Empty. The laughter from the sunroom was loud, covering the sound of my footsteps. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Darlene's desk was a massive mahogany antique. Dominating the space, on the corner, just as Tessa had said, sat a small stack of manila folders. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was an invasion of privacy. If she caught me, it would be the proof she needed that I was unstable, but I had to know. I stepped closer. I didn't touch them. I just leaned over to read the labels written in Darlene's precise looping cursive. The top folder read, Hall, Property. Lake. The second read, Ethan, Trust Disbursement. The third read, Custody, Precedence. The room spun. Custody? She was looking up custody precedents. She was researching how to take my son. And the property, the lake cabin. That place had been in the Crowley family for generations. Ethan's name was on the deed along with Darlene's. We paid the insurance on it, but we rarely used it. Why was there a folder? I heard footsteps in the hall. I bolted away from the desk, grabbing a book from the shelf at random. I turned just as the door swung open. It was Ethan. Hazel? He asked, looking confused. What are you doing in here? I exhaled, my knees shaking. I was looking for the bathroom and got turned around. I just saw the books. He looked at me, then at the desk, then back at me. He closed the door behind him. You were looking at the papers, weren't you? He asked softly. I dropped the pretense. Ethan, what is going on? Tessa told me she is building a case against me. I saw the folder. It says custody. Ethan rubbed his face with his hands. He looked exhausted. She is just preparing. She thinks you are going to leave me. She thinks the Chicago job is a prelude to a breakup. I told her she is crazy, but she insists on being ready. And the property folder? I asked. What is that? He hesitated. He looked at the floor, then at the window. She wants me to sign something regarding the cabin, he admitted. There is some issue with the trust. She says if I sign a quitclaim or something temporary, it simplifies the tax burden for the estate. It keeps the cabin in the family name without the liability. A quitclaim? I stared at him. Ethan, if you sign a quitclaim, you are giving up your ownership. She said it is temporary, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Just to get through the fiscal year, then she adds me back. And you believe that? She is my mother. Hazel, she is not going to steal my inheritance. She is researching custody precedents. Ethan, I hissed. She is telling people I am unstable. Does that sound like a woman you should hand your legal rights to? He didn't answer. He looked like a trapped animal. I realized then that he was under immense pressure. She had been working on him for weeks, maybe months, chipping away at his defenses, using guilt and duty as weapons. Do not sign it, I said. Ethan, look at me. Do not sign anything today. I won't, he said. I told her I need to read it first. Good. Now let's get out of here before she finds us. We walked back to the sunroom separately. I felt like I was walking on a wire over a pit of vipers. Every smile from a guest felt like a lie. Every glance felt like an accusation. I found a spot near the window, clutching a glass of iced tea. I needed to leave. I needed to grab Owen and run. But I couldn't. Not yet. We had to get through dinner. Maris Bexley approached me. She moved with a silent, gliding grace that was unnerving. She held a plate of stuffed mushrooms, but she wasn't eating. Hazel, she said, Maris. She stood next to me, looking out at the gray garden. You know, she began, her voice low and conversational. I was watching you with your son earlier, in the hallway. I stiffened. Oh? Yes. It was interesting. You seemed very controlled. I try to be patient, I said. Maris turned to face me. Her eyes were magnified behind her glasses, searching my face for cracks. It must take a lot of effort, she said, to hold it all in. Darlene mentioned that you have had some struggles in the past. With your temper. I turned to look at her fully. I beg your pardon? There is no shame in it, Maris said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. We all have our burdens, but I was wondering, have you ever considered therapy for anger management? The question was so loud. Despite being spoken softly, it seemed to echo in the room. Several heads turned. Barbara Crowley looked over. Rory Weller paused mid-sentence. Maris had timed it perfectly. She had asked it during a lull in the conversation. She had asked it as if she were recommending a good plumber. I stared at her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. This was it. This was the sabotage. She was validating the rumor in front of witnesses. If I got angry, if I snapped at her for asking such an insulting question, I proved them right. I would be the angry, unstable woman yelling at the nice church lady. But if I said nothing, I accepted the premise. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I felt the urge to throw my iced tea in her face. But then I saw Darlene. She was across the room, pretending to adjust a floral arrangement. But she was watching. She was waiting for the explosion. She wanted the scene. She needed the scene. I took a deep breath. I dug my fingernails into my palm. I realized then that this entire dinner was not a celebration. It was a courtroom, and I was the defendant. I looked at Maris. I forced a smile onto my face. It was razor sharp. I think you have been misinformed. Maris, I said, my voice steady and clear enough for Rory to hear. I do not struggle with anger, but I do struggle with boundaries, and I am working on that. Maris blinked. She hadn't expected that. She expected denial or rage. Oh, she said, well, that is good to hear. Dinner is served, Darlene announced loudly, cutting through the tension she had helped orchestrate. I walked toward the dining room. My legs felt heavy. I sat down at the table, taking my place next to Owen. The table was set with the crystal I had polished. The plastic cup sat at Owen's place, a beacon of my earlier compromise, as the guests took their seats. I looked around the table. Kent, Barbara, the Millers, Rory, Maris, Tessa, Ethan, Darlene, they were all playing their parts. The dutiful son, the concerned friend, the benevolent matriarch, but I was done playing mine. I looked at the folder in my mind. Custody, property. Darlene didn't just want to win the holiday. She wanted to win the war for my family. She wanted to strip me of my reputation, my husband, and my son. I reached under the table and took Ethan's hand. He squeezed back, his palm sweaty. I picked up my fork. The metal felt cold and hard. I am ready. I thought, whatever you throw at me next, Darlene, I am ready. Because now I knew the stakes, and for my son, I would burn this perfect, staged house to the ground if I had to. The turkey sat in the center of the table like a sacrificial offering, glistening under the chandelier's crystal teardrops. It was perfectly browned, surrounded by garnishes that looked too artistic to be edible. The air in the dining room was heavy, thick with the scent of roasted sage and the unspoken animosity that had been brewing since we walked through the front door. I sat next to Owen, my hand resting briefly on his knee under the tablecloth. He was staring at his plate, his feet dangling off the heavy oak chair. Looking small and out of place in this room of adults who were playing a game he did not understand. On his other side sat Ethan, who was aggressively focused on unfolding his napkin, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Darlene stood at the head of the table. She held a wine glass filled with an expensive Chardonnay. the liquid catching the light as she tapped a silver spoon against the rim. The sharp ding, ding, ding silenced the room instantly. "I would like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice melodic and projecting to the back of the room. The guests, Rory Weller, the Millers, Maris Bexley, Kent, and Barbara, all raised their glasses with practiced obedience. Ethan lifted his water glass. I did the same. "To family," Darlene began, her eyes sweeping over the guests but carefully avoiding me, and specifically, to the women of this family, the mothers, the caretakers, the ones who sacrifice their own selfish desires to keep the foundation strong, to the women who hold families together, rather than tearing them apart. She lowered her gaze then, locking eyes with me. It was not a subtle look. It was a glare, sharp and direct, challenging me to speak, challenging me to take offense. The insult was wrapped in a compliment, a classic Darlene maneuver. She was the martyr. I was the wrecking ball. "To strong women," Rory Weller echoed, oblivious to the subtext, raising his glass higher. "Here, here," Kent Crowley mumbled, already looking longingly at the mashed potatoes. I took a sip of water. It tasted metallic. I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I forced it down. I would not give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I placed my glass down gently, perfectly aligned with the coaster. Darlene sat down, and the meal began. The passing of dishes was a logistical ballet. Heavy platters of stuffing, green bean casserole, and candied yams circulated clockwise. I watched Owen carefully. He was trying so hard. He said please and thank you in a quiet voice. He took small scoops. He was being exactly the young man Darlene demanded he be, but the tension was contagious. Owen's hands were shaking slightly. He reached for a basket of dinner rolls that Barbara had set down near the center of the table. His arm extended. His sleeve caught the edge of his plastic red cup, the indestructible cup Darlene had insisted upon, and it tipped. Water sloshed out. It was not a tidal wave. It was perhaps 2 ounces of water. It pooled on the plastic placemat and dripped onto the tablecloth, creating a dark spot the size of a coin. "Oh," Owen gasped, pulling his hand back as if he had been burned. "I am sorry. It was a nothing moment, a non-event. At home, we would have tossed a napkin over it and kept eating. But in Darlene's dining room, the sound of the plastic cup hitting the table echoed like a gunshot. The conversation stopped. I moved instantly. I didn't panic. I didn't gasp. I simply picked up my linen napkin and blotted the spill. "It is okay, buddy," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. "It is just water. It dries. Grab a roll." But Darlene was already staring at the wet spot on her tablecloth, as if it were blood. Unbelievable. She exhaled, loud enough for the entire table to hear. I froze. I kept my hand on the napkin, soaking up the water. Accidents happen. "Darlene," I said, not looking up. "Accidents?" she repeated, her voice sharpening. She looked at Rory, then at Maris, seeking her jury. "This is not an accident. Hazel, this is a pattern. This is a lack of control." I looked up then. "Darlene," he bumped a cup. "He is 8. He is undisciplined," she declared. She set her fork down with a clatter. "It is exactly what I was saying earlier. He has no spatial awareness because he is never taught to pay attention. He runs wild at your house, and then he comes here and destroys things because he does not understand the concept of respect." The table was deadly silent. Rory Weller was looking at his turkey as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Ethan had stopped chewing. "Mom, stop," Ethan said, his voice weak. "It is just water. It is the principle." "Ethan," Darlene snapped, turning on him, "you let him get away with everything. You let her let him get away with everything. Look at him. He is a nervous wreck. Why? Because he has no structure." Owen shrank in his chair. Tears welled in his eyes. He looked from me to his grandmother, terrified. He believed her. He believed he had destroyed the dinner. He believed he was bad. That was the moment. The knot in my stomach, the one that had been tightening since we pulled into the driveway, suddenly unraveled, but it didn't leave me feeling empty. It left me feeling cold, ice cold, for 10 years. I had played this game. I had bitten my tongue. I had apologized for things I didn't do. I had allowed her to crop me out of photos, criticize my cooking, and undermine my marriage. All for the sake of peace. I thought I was being the bigger person. I thought I was keeping the family together. But as I looked at my son's tear-filled eyes, I realized I wasn't keeping the peace. I was enabling a bully. I was teaching my son that love meant enduring abuse from people who claimed to care about you. I was teaching him that his dignity was a fair price to pay for a turkey dinner. I looked at the folders in my mind. Custody, property, trust. She wasn't just mean, she was strategic. And right now, she was performing. She was creating a scene of chaos to validate the story she had told Maris and Rory, that I was an unfit mother raising a feral child. If I yelled, I proved her right. If I cried, I proved her right. I blotted the last of the water. I folded the napkin and placed it over the wet spot. I turned to Owen. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. Ignoring the woman at the head of the table, "Look at me." He looked up, a tear sliding down his cheek. "You did nothing wrong," I said clearly. "It was an accident. You are doing a great job. Eat your roll." Darlene let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. "You are rewarding him?" she asked, incredulous. "You are rewarding him for ruining the table setting?" "This is exactly why—" I cut her off, not by interrupting, but by picking up my fork and taking a bite of stuffing. I chewed slowly. I swallowed. Darlene's face reddened. She wasn't used to being ignored. She needed the conflict to fuel the next stage of her attack. "You are isolating him." "Hazel," she said, shifting tactics. Her voice took on a sorrowful, concerned tone that was far more dangerous than her anger. "It is not just the discipline. It is everything. You are pulling Ethan away from his roots. You are dragging this child to a city where he will be lost." I kept eating. Maris nodded sympathetically from across the table. "It does seem like a big change," Maris murmured. "And the spending." Darlene continued. Emboldened by the nod, she looked at Rory now, making sure the councilman was listening. "Rory, you know how hard it is to build a legacy in this town. My husband and I worked for 40 years to build what we have, and to see it drained, to see resources wasted on frivolous lifestyle changes." She was talking about the fictional assets she claimed I was stealing. She was painting a picture of me as a gold digger. "Ethan," Darlene said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I know you are trying to be a good husband, but you are being used. She is using Owen as leverage. She is using him to make you do what she wants, to sign papers you should not sign, to leave a home you love." I stopped chewing. Using Owen as leverage. The accusation hung in the air. Toxic and specific. It was a legal term. It was something a lawyer would say in a deposition. "She uses the child as leverage." She was reading from a script. She had rehearsed this. She had probably practiced this speech in the mirror while Maris timed her. She wanted me to explode. She wanted me to flip the table. She wanted the angry, unstable woman to make an appearance so Rory Weller could go back to the town council and say, "Darlene Crowley is a saint for dealing with that daughter-in-law." I looked at Ethan. He was staring at his mother, his mouth slightly open, shock registering on his face. He finally saw it. He finally heard the malice beneath the concern, but he didn't speak. He was paralyzed by a lifetime of conditioning. So I had to do it. I placed my fork down. I wiped my mouth with my napkin. I pushed my chair back. The scraping of wood against the floor was loud, deliberate. I stood up. I did not tower over them. I did not wave my arms. I stood with my hands clasped loosely in front of me. My posture relaxed. I felt a strange sense of elevation, as if I were floating above the scene, watching the petty mechanics of Darlene's manipulation from a great height. The table went silent again. Darlene looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She braced herself for the shouting match. She took a breath, ready to counter my scream with a tearful plea for civility. I looked at her. I looked right into the center of her pupils. "We are done performing for your approval." I said the words quietly. I did not project. I did not use a stage voice. I spoke them with the flat, final certainty of a judge reading a verdict. 6 words. Darlene froze. Her mouth, which had opened to launch her next volley, stayed open. She blinked. The reaction in the room was physical. Rory Weller leaned back in his chair, his eyebrows shooting up. He was a politician. He knew the difference between a tantrum and a position statement. He recognized power when he saw it, and the power in the room had just shifted. Barbara Crowley let out a small, stifled gasp. Kent stopped chewing. Darlene's brain seemed to stutter. She had prepared for a fight. She had prepared for defense. She had not prepared for dismissal. "Performing?" she sputtered, her laugh sounding high and nervous. "Hazel, honestly, do not be dramatic. We are having a family dinner. No one is performing." I did not answer her. I had said my piece. I turned to Ethan. "I'm going to take Owen for a walk," I said. "Hey, we will wait for you at the car." Darlene slammed her hand onto the table. The silverware jumped. "You will not walk out of my house," she commanded. Her mask slipped completely. The benevolent matriarch vanished, replaced by a desperate, controlling woman losing her grip. "Sit down. Hazel, we are discussing the future of this family." I looked at her one last time. "No," I said, "you are discussing a narrative you invented, and I am not a character in it anymore." Darlene's face turned a mottled purple. She looked frantically at Maris, then at Rory. "She is unwell," Darlene said, pointing a shaking finger at me. You see? You see how she is? She snaps. She cannot handle a simple conversation about the child's well-being. This is exactly what I told you. Rory, this is why we need to protect the trust. She is irrational." She looked at Tessa. "Tessa, tell them! Tell them what she is like." All eyes turned to Tessa. My sister-in-law was sitting 3 seats down, her face pale. She had spent her entire life trying to be invisible, trying to avoid the laser beam of her mother's judgment. Tessa looked at Darlene. Then she looked at me. She saw me standing there, calm, refusing to engage, protecting my son. Something broke in Tessa. Or perhaps, something healed. She isn't the one performing. "Mom," Tessa said. Her voice was shaky, but audible. Darlene whipped her head around. "Excuse me?" "You coached us," Tessa said. The words rushed out of her, propelled by adrenaline. "You called me 3 times this week. You told me to bring up the instability. You told Maris to ask about the anger therapy. You gave us a script." "Mom." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Rory Weller turned his head slowly to look at Darlene. His expression had changed from polite interest to professional distance. Maris Bexley went pale. She lowered her gaze to her plate, suddenly finding the green beans fascinating. Darlene looked as if she had been slapped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The curtain had been ripped down. The wires were visible. I did not gloat. I did not say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. The truth was sitting in the center of the table, uglier than the spill on the tablecloth. "Come on, Owen," I said softly. Owen slid off his chair. He left the plastic cup. He left the half-eaten roll. He took my hand. His grip was tight, but his breathing was steady. He knew I had him. He knew he was safe. We walked out of the dining room. I felt Darlene's eyes boring into my back, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. The narrative had collapsed. We walked through the living room, past the perfectly chopped pillows, past the cropped family photo. I didn't look at any of it. It all looked like a set for a play that had been canceled. I opened the front door. The cold November air hit my face, sharp and clean. It smelled of rain and dead leaves, but to me, it smelled like freedom. We stepped onto the porch. I closed the door behind us, shutting out the warmth, the food, and the poison. We walked down the brick path to the driveway. The gravel crunched under our boots. "Mom?" Owen asked, his voice small in the vast gray evening. "Yeah, buddy? Are we in trouble?" I stopped. I knelt down on the cold driveway. Ignoring the dampness soaking into my jeans, I looked him in the eye. "No," I said firmly. "We are the opposite of in trouble. We are free." He nodded, accepting this. "Can we go home now?" "Soon," I promised. "We just have to wait for Dad." We stood by the car, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked back at the house. The windows were glowing with warm, yellow light. From the outside, it looked perfect. It looked like the American dream. But I knew what was happening inside. The silence was over. The shouting was about to start. But this time, I wouldn't be the target. I waited for the door to open. I waited to see if my husband would walk through it. Because that was the final question. I had declared independence. Now, Ethan had to decide if he was a husband or if he was just another prop in Darlene's collection. The front door opened. Ethan stepped out. He didn't look back. He walked toward us, his stride long and purposeful. He looked shaken, pale, like a man who had just woken up from a coma to find the world had changed. But he was walking toward us. Darlene appeared in the doorway behind him. "Ethan!" she screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound that tore through the quiet neighborhood. "Ethan, you get back here. If you leave now, you are choosing her. You are choosing ruin." Ethan stopped. He turned around slowly. He looked at his mother. He looked at the woman who had birthed him, raised him, and tried to own him. "I am not choosing ruin. Mom," he called back. His voice didn't boom, but it carried. "I am choosing my wife." He turned back to us. He reached the car. He unlocked it with a beep that sounded like a victory trumpet. "Get in," he said. We climbed into the car. The engine roared to life. As we backed out of the driveway, I saw Darlene standing on the porch, a small, diminishing figure in the rearview mirror. She was still shouting, but I couldn't hear her. We were behind glass. We were moving. We were done performing. The tires crunched against the gravel as Ethan slammed on the brakes just before we reached the main road. The sudden stop threw us forward against our seatbelts, the inertia mirroring the emotional crash we had just survived. The engine idled, a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards, filling the silence where Darlene's screaming had been only moments before. We were safe. Technically, we were inside our own vehicle, behind locked doors, but the air inside the car felt thin, charged with the adrenaline of escape. In the back seat, Owen was hyperventilating. It was a quiet, terrifying sound, small, hitching gasps as he tried to pull oxygen into his lungs. He was staring at his hands, his fingers curled into tight fists. "Turn the car off," I said to Ethan. He looked at me, his eyes wide and unseeing. "What?" "Turn it off. We are not going anywhere yet. Not until he is calm." Ethan killed the engine. The silence of the countryside rushed in, heavy and oppressive. I unbuckled my seatbelt and twisted around to face the back seat. I reached out and covered Owen's fists with my hands. His skin was cold. "Owen," I said, keeping my voice low and anchored, "look at me." He shook his head, squeezing his eyes shut. "I ruined it," he whispered. "I made Grandma mad." "No," I said firmly. "Open your eyes, buddy." He slowly peeled his eyes open. They were red-rimmed, filled with a shame that did not belong to him. "Listen to me," I said. "You did not ruin anything. You spilled water. Everyone spills water. I spill coffee twice a week. Dad spills salsa on his shirts constantly." I saw a flicker of a smile on Ethan's face in the rearview mirror, but it was ghostly. "What happened in there?" I continued, smoothing Owen's hair back from his forehead. "Had nothing to do with you. Sometimes adults behave badly. Sometimes they forget how to be kind because they are too worried about being right. Do you understand?" He nodded slowly. "Grandma was yelling. Yes, she was. And that is not okay. It is not your job to make her happy. And it is not your job to be perfect. Your job is to be a kid. Your job is to stay kind and safe. And right now, you are safe. I have you. Dad has you. We are not going to let anyone yell at you like that again." Owen took a deep, shuddering breath. His shoulders dropped an inch. "Can we go home?" "We are going to go home," I promised. "But first, Dad and I need to talk for 2 minutes. Can you put your headphones on and play your game?" Owen nodded. He reached for his tablet, the familiar glow of the screen acting as a digital shield against the real world. Once the headphones were over his ears, I turned back to the front. Ethan was gripping the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles looked like polished bone. He was staring out at the dark road, at the empty stretch of asphalt that led back to the city, back to sanity. "You need to breathe," I said. "I didn't know." He said. His voice was brittle. "I swear to God, Hazel, I didn't know it was going to be like that. I thought she was just stressed. I didn't realize it was a trial," I supplied. "A character assassination?" He turned to look at me. He looked wrecked. He looked like the boy in the photos on Darlene's mantle. The one who just wanted to please everyone. "She had a script. Ethan," I said. "She was reading lines. She coached Tessa. She coached Maris. She set us up to fail so she could document it." "I know," he whispered. "I heard what Tessa said." He slumped back against the seat, covering his face with his hands. "I feel sick. I feel like I just woke up in a different reality." "You are waking up," I said, "but you are not fully awake yet." I reached out and pulled his hands away from his face. I needed him to look at me. I needed him to see me, not the villain his mother had painted, and not the passive peacekeeper he wanted me to be. "We cannot leave yet," I said. "What?" He stared at me. "Hazel, she kicked us out. She is screaming on the porch. We cannot go back there. We have to," I said. "We left our coats. We left my bag. But more importantly, Ethan, we left the truth behind. I do not care about the coats. I care about the folders." I said. He froze. "The folders in the study." I continued, my voice hard, "the ones about the property, the trust, the custody precedents. Ethan, she is not just being mean. She is moving money. She is moving assets. And she is trying to get you to sign something that locks you into her financial mess." Ethan shook his head. "She wouldn't. She loves the cabin. She wouldn't risk it. She is risking everything to keep control." I said, "And if we drive away now, without knowing what is in those papers, without knowing what she has already done in your name, we are walking away blind. We are leaving our flank exposed." I leaned in closer. "So I need to know, Ethan, right now, before we turn this car around or drive it back up that driveway, are you my partner? Or are you her project?" The question hung in the small space between us. It was the question that had been haunting our marriage for a decade, unasked until now. Ethan looked at the house, glowing on the hill like a beautiful, poisonous flower. Then he looked at Owen in the back seat, lost in his game. Finally, he looked at me. "I am your partner," he said. His voice was stronger this time. "Then prove it." I said. "We go back in. We get our things. We get the answers. And we do not apologize." Ethan took a breath. He started the car. He shifted into reverse. We backed up the driveway. The gravel crunching again, sounding less like bones this time and more like grit. We parked. We walked back to the front door. It was unlocked. When we stepped into the foyer, the house was eerily quiet. The screaming had stopped. The air smelled of cooling turkey and expensive perfume. We walked into the living room. The scene had shifted. The guests were no longer at the table. They were scattered around the sitting area, holding coffee cups and brandy snifters. The atmosphere was awkward, disjointed, like a party where someone had just died. Darlene was sitting in her wingback chair, holding a handkerchief to her nose. She looked up when we entered. Her eyes were dry, but her face was arranged in a portrait of tragic suffering. "You came back," she said, her voice trembling with staged hope. "To apologize? We forgot our coats," I said flatly, "and we need to collect a few things." Darlene let out a long, ragged sigh. She looked at Rory Weller, who was standing by the fireplace, looking desperate to be literally anywhere else. "She is confused," Darlene said to the room, gesturing vaguely at me. "You see? She runs out. She drags the child into the cold, and then she comes back as if nothing happened. It is the instability. It is the mood swings. I have tried to get her help. She was doubling down. She was trying to overwrite the reality of what just happened with a new layer of lies. She was betting that social politeness would keep everyone silent, but the room didn't feel the way she wanted it to. Maris Bexley was sitting on the sofa. She held her teacup, but she wasn't drinking. She was watching me. When Darlene said mood swings, Maris frowned. It was a small movement, a tightening of the lips. Maris had seen me calmly wipe up the water. She had seen me calmly exit. My behavior didn't match the hysterical woman profile Darlene was selling. I ignored Darlene. I walked toward the coat closet. Ethan followed me, keeping his head up, refusing to look at his mother. As I reached for my coat, I felt a presence beside me. It was Kent Crowley. Darlene's brother smelled of scotch and Old Spice. His face was flushed, his eyes watery. He looked like a man who had seen too much and said too little for too long. "Hazel," he murmured, pretending to search for his own scarf. "Kent," I said, not stopping. "She has done this before." "You know," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. I paused, my hand on my wool coat. "Done what?" "The social execution," he said. A grim smile twisted his lips. "She did it to our cousin Sheila 10 years ago. When Sheila tried to ask questions about the grandmother's estate, Darlene painted her as a drug addict, ruined her reputation in the church. Sheila moved to Oregon just to escape the whispers." I looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I liked Sheila," Kent said, "and because I see what she is doing to you. It is always about money. Hazel, or reputation, usually both." I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice. "Kent, I saw folders in the study. Property, trust. Why is she worried about the cabin?" Kent's face went pale. The flush drained away, leaving him looking sallow and old. "You saw the folders?" he asked. "I saw the labels. What is happening with the cabin?" "Kent?" He glanced over his shoulder at Darlene, who was busy weeping at Rory. She leveraged it. Kent whispered, 2 years ago, she took out a private loan against the equity, a hard money loan, high interest. She wanted to fund that campaign for the Historical Society presidency, and she made some bad investments with a financial advisor who turned out to be a ghost. My stomach dropped. The cabin is leveraged? There is a lien. Kent said, a big one, and it is coming due. She needs to refinance, but she cannot do it with her credit score. She needs a co-signer, or she needs to transfer the title. I finished, to someone with clean credit, someone like Ethan. Kent nodded. If he signs that quitclaim, or whatever temporary document she has cooked up, he assumes the debt, she saves her reputation, keeps the Historical Society roll, and Ethan is left holding a bag filled with 6 figures of debt. I felt a cold fury wash over me. It was so clean, so predatory. It wasn't just about controlling Ethan, it was about using him as a financial life raft. Thank you, Kent, I said. I grabbed my coat. I turned to find Tessa standing near the kitchen door. She looked terrified, but she beckoned me over. I walked to her. Ethan was right behind me. Tessa, I said. She is telling people it is just family paperwork, Tessa whispered, her eyes darting around the room. But Hazel, I heard her on the phone with the bank yesterday. She used Ethan's name. She said, my son is providing the assurance. She acted like it was already done. Assurance, I repeated. She is using him as collateral. She wants him to sign tonight, Tessa said. She was going to corner him after dinner. That is why she wanted you gone, or discredited. If you were the crazy wife, Ethan wouldn't listen to you. He would listen to his protective mother. It all made sense. The anger, the staging, the character assassination. It was all a smokescreen to separate Ethan from his judgment so she could rob him blind. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were steady. I walked into the powder room and locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid and typed a text to Celeste Marin. Celeste was my college roommate, a paralegal who ate contracts for breakfast and destroyed bullies for lunch. Me. Urgent. Mother-in-law trying to get husband to sign temporary documents regarding property/trust. Claims it simplifies paperwork. Found out property has hidden lien/loan. She has been using his name as assurance. What do I do? We are in the house. The 3 dots appeared instantly. Celeste. Do not sign. Absolutely nothing. Not even a birthday card. If there is a lien and she transfers title, he assumes the debt. Or if she makes him a guarantor, he is liable. This is fraud territory. Hazel, take photos of the document titles if you can. Get names of any witnesses she has lined up. And get out. I unlocked the door. I felt armored. I wasn't just a daughter-in-law anymore. I was a witness. I walked back into the hallway. Ethan was waiting for me, holding Owen's backpack. We are leaving, I said. But first, I want the papers. Ethan looked confused. What? We are going to ask for them, I said. As we turned toward the foyer, Darlene stepped into the hallway. She blocked our path, just as she had blocked Owen earlier. But she wasn't looking at Owen. She was looking at me. Her face was wet with tears, her mascara perfectly smudged to evoke maximum sympathy. Hazel, she choked out, please, can we just stop this? I stopped. I looked at her. I am so sorry if I upset you, she said, reaching out a trembling hand. I just want what is best for Ethan. I am a mother. You know what that is like. We worry. We get emotional. She was pivoting. The anger hadn't worked, so she was trying guilt. After everything I have done for you, she whispered, the wedding, the down payment help, to humiliate me in my own home, in front of Rory? It breaks my heart. She sniffed, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for the social contract to force me to apologize. I didn't blink. I appreciate the hospitality. Darlene, I said, my voice cool and detached, but we are past apologies. I want to see the documents. I said. Darlene froze. The sorrow evaporated, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. What documents? She asked, her voice hardening. The ones in the study, I said. The ones you want Ethan to sign. The ones about the cabin and the trust. Oh, those? She waved a hand dismissively. Just boring tax things. We can deal with that next week. It is a holiday. No, I said, we will deal with it now. If it is just tax paperwork, bring it out. Let us read it. Darlene stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. Not here. Not in the hallway where everyone can hear. Come upstairs. Come to the study. Just family. We can talk privately. I looked at the stairs. The second floor was her domain. It was private. It was isolated. Up there, she could lie. She could scream. She could twist reality without witnesses. I looked at Ethan. He was watching her, his jaw set. No, I said. Darlene blinked. Excuse me? We will not be going upstairs, I said. All conversations happen right here, in the common space. But if you have papers for Ethan to sign, bring them here, I said, gesturing to the foyer table, in plain view of the living room where Rory and Maris were sitting. Bring them out into the light. Darlene's eyes darted to the living room. She knew she couldn't do it. If she brought the papers out, if I read the terms aloud in front of a councilman and a paralegal's friend, her scheme would be exposed. She relied on the shadow. She relied on trust. I cannot believe you, she stammered. You are being paranoid. This is exactly what I mean about your mental state. Stop it, Ethan said. It was 2 words, but they were spoken with a depth of voice I had never heard from him before. Darlene looked at her son. Stop lying. Mom, Ethan said, we know about the lien. We know about the loan. Darlene went white. It was the color of old bone. The air seemed to leave her lungs. Who told you that? She whispered. It doesn't matter, Ethan said. I am not signing anything. Not today. Not ever. Until my lawyer sees it. Lawyer? Darlene screeched. She forgot to whisper. She forgot the guests. You would bring a lawyer into this house? Against your own mother? You brought a politician and a spy into our Thanksgiving, I said calmly, nodding toward the living room where Maris was now openly staring. You made this a legal matter. Darlene, we are just responding in kind. Darlene looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. There was no mask left, no sweet mother-in-law, just a woman who had been caught trying to trap her son to save her own skin. Get out, she hissed. We are going. I said. I picked up Owen's backpack. I opened the front door. Hazel. I turned back. Darlene was trembling. Her hands clenched at her sides. You think you have won? She spat. You think you can take him away from me? I will ruin you. I will tell everyone what you are. I looked at her. I looked at the sad, desperate woman standing in her perfect, staged hallway, surrounded by people who were already beginning to doubt her. You have already told them. Darlene, I said, and they saw the truth. I stepped out onto the porch. Ethan followed me. He closed the door firmly. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. We walked to the car. We didn't run. We walked when we got inside. Owen was still wearing his headphones, tapping away at his game. He looked up and smiled. Did you get the stuff? He asked. Yeah, buddy, Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. We got the stuff. Ethan started the car. He drove down the driveway, past the manicured hedges, past the perfect lawn. We turned onto the main road, the darkness swallowing the house behind us. I looked at Ethan. He was crying. Silent tears were streaming down his face, illuminated by the dashboard lights. I am sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry. I reached across the console and took his hand. It is over, I said. But I knew it wasn't over. Darlene was wounded, and wounded animals were dangerous. She would strike back. She would try to salvage her reputation, but she had made a fatal error. She had assumed I was weak because I was quiet. She had assumed I would fold to keep the peace. She had forgotten that the strongest storms start with a drop in pressure. I looked at my phone. Celeste had sent another text. Celeste, did you get out? Me. We are out, and we know everything. Celeste. Good. Tomorrow. We go on a fence. I put the phone away. I watched the city lights flicker on the horizon. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. I wish I could say we walked out the second Darlene refused to show us the papers. I wish I could say the click of the latch I heard in my mind was the end of it right then and there. But the truth is, the end of a family is never that clean. Gravity has a way of holding you in place even when you know the house is burning down. We did not leave immediately. The standoff in the hallway had drawn blood, but the wound was not yet fatal. We were still standing in the foyer, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and expensive perfume. When Rory Weller cleared his throat from the living room, "Is everything all right out there?" he called out. His voice was jovial, but it had a brittle edge. He was a politician, and he knew the sound of a constituency crumbling. Darlene's face transformed instantly. The snarl vanished, replaced by a mask of flustered hospitality. She smoothed her cashmere sweater, touched her hair, and turned toward the archway. "Everything is fine," she trilled, though her voice was an octave too high. "Just a little family debate about schedules. You know how it is." She looked at Ethan and me with eyes that were hard as flint. "You will not make a scene in front of him," she hissed. "You will come in. You will have coffee, and we will discuss the paperwork later. If you walk out now, you humiliate Ethan, not me." She marched back into the living room, confident that the social contract would bind us to her, and for a moment, it did. Ethan looked at me, his hand still gripping the strap of Owen's backpack. He looked exhausted, caught between the instinct to flee and the lifelong training to obey. 1 hour. I whispered to him, "We stay for 1 hour. We get the truth, and then we leave, and we never come back." We walked into the living room. The fracturing had already begun. The guests were no longer a cohesive audience. They had splintered into small, uncomfortable islands. Kent and Barbara were by the fireplace, speaking in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward us as we entered. The Millers were aggressively examining a painting on the far wall, desperate to avoid eye contact. And then there was Rory Weller. I watched him as I took a seat on the edge of the ottoman. He wasn't just a guest. I realized that now. Darlene had seated him at her right hand. She had directed the gratitude circle to him. She had staged the strong women toast for his benefit. Rory was the key. I pulled my phone out, keeping it low in my lap. I searched Rory Weller, Briar Glen Council. The results loaded on the screen. He was the head of the Briar Glen Community Preservation Board. And right below his bio was a news item from 3 weeks ago. Preservation Board to appoint new chair for Historical Trust. The Historical Trust. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. The legacy Darlene kept talking about. The leadership role she had hinted at. She was lobbying for that chair. It was a prestigious position, one that controlled grants, zoning, and social standing in the county. But the bylaws, I zoomed in on the PDF, required the chair to be a model of community stability with impeccable financial standing. If Darlene had a lien on her property, or if her family was seen as fractured and unstable, she would lose the appointment. She needed Ethan's clean credit to fix the lien, and she needed my silence to fix the image. My phone buzzed. It was Celeste. Celeste, I am looking at the county clerk records online. It is slow, but I see a filing from 2 years ago, a high-interest private loan against the Crowley estate. Hazel, it is messy. If she defaults, they foreclose. Do not sign anything. Photograph the document titles if you can, and get names of any witnesses she has lined up. I looked up. Darlene was pouring coffee for Rory, her hand shaking just slightly. So, Rory, she was saying, her voice dripping with sugar. I was thinking about the proposal for the town square renovation. I have some ideas about the landscaping that I think would really align with the board's vision. Rory took the cup. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked over Darlene's shoulder at me. He saw the way I was sitting, straight-backed, calm, watching her. He saw the way Ethan was standing near the window, looking like a prisoner of war. We can certainly discuss it. Darlene, Rory said noncommittally, although the board is looking very closely at stability for the next term. Darlene stiffened. Of course. Stability is everything. That is why family is so important to me. She shot a glare at me, daring me to contradict her. I didn't have to. The contradiction came from an unexpected source. Maris Bexley stood up. She placed her teacup on the saucer with a sharp clink. She walked across the room, bypassing Darlene entirely, and sat down next to me on the ottoman. The room went quiet. Maris was Darlene's lieutenant, her church friend, her enforcer. Hazel, Maris said quietly. Maris, I replied. She looked down at her hands. They were clasped tightly in her lap. I owe you an apology, she said. I waited. Darlene asked me to come today. Maris continued, her voice low enough that only I, and perhaps Rory, who was leaning in, could hear. She told me she was worried about Owen's safety. She asked me to observe you. She said she might need a character witness for a hearing. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. A hearing. Custody. She told you I was dangerous. She said you were volatile. Maris admitted. She asked me to confirm her concerns if anyone asked. Maris looked up at me then. Her eyes were magnified by her glasses, and they were filled with regret. But I have been watching you. Hazel, you are not volatile. You are the only calm person in this room. She glanced over at Darlene, who was staring at us with a look of pure panic. I do not like being used, Maris said, her voice firming up. And I do not like being lied to. I thought this was about helping a child. I see now it is about something else. Thank you, Maris. I said. Maris stood up. She walked over to Rory. Rory, she said clearly, I think the board should be very careful about its next appointments. Character matters. Rory nodded slowly. I think you are right. Maris, Darlene dropped the silver coffee pot. It hit the tray with a deafening crash, coffee splashing over the rim. "Oh!" she cried, grabbing napkins. "Clumsy me. Just nerves." But the mask was slipping. It wasn't just slipping, it was melting. She looked around the room, realizing she was losing them. She was losing the audience she had curated so carefully. She needed a villain. And since I refused to be one, she decided to create a victim. "Where is Owen?" she demanded, looking around wildly. Owen was in the sunroom, sitting on the floor with his tablet. "I need to speak to my grandson," Darlene announced. "If you two are going to tear this family apart, he deserves to know why. He deserves to know that his grandmother fought for him." She started toward the sunroom. I moved. I didn't run, but I moved with a speed that surprised even me. I stepped into the archway, blocking her path. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" Darlene tried to push past me. "I have a right to say goodbye to him. I have a right to explain that his mother is dragging him away. You will not speak to him," I said. "You will not poison him with your stories. I am going to tell him the truth," Darlene shouted. Her voice was getting louder, sharper. The gentle grandmother act was gone. "I am going to tell him that you are the reason he cannot come to the cabin anymore. I am going to tell him that you are the reason his father is unhappy." Ethan appeared at my side. "Mom, stop," he said. "Don't you tell me to stop?" Darlene spun on him. "I am doing this for you. I am trying to save your inheritance." She tried to dodge around me. She was heading for Owen, and I could see the malicious intent in her eyes. She wanted to hurt him. She wanted to make him cry so she could blame me for the tears. "Tessa!" I called out. Tessa was in the kitchen doorway. She looked terrified. "Take Owen upstairs," I said, keeping my eyes on Darlene. "Go to the guest room. Put on a movie. Turn the volume up all the way. Do not come down until I text you." Tessa nodded. She ran into the sunroom. "Owen, come on. Buddy," I heard her say, "let's go watch the Avengers." I heard their footsteps running up the back stairs. I stood in the archway until I heard the door click shut above us. Only then did I relax my stance. Darlene was breathing hard, her face mottled with red. "You have turned everyone against me," she spat. "My daughter, my friends, my son. You did this yourself." "Darlene," I said. She laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "You think you are so smart. Hazel. You think you have won because you found a few folders? You do not understand how the world works. You need money to survive. You need status. And without me, Ethan has nothing." Ethan stepped forward. He walked into the center of the room. He looked at Rory. He looked at Kent. He looked at the Millers. "I want to make something clear," Ethan said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud enough to be heard in every corner of the room. Darlene froze. "Ethan, we are not signing anything," Ethan said. "Not today. Not ever." "Ethan," Darlene warned, her eyes bulging. "There is a lien on the cabin, isn't there?" Ethan asked. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath. The secret was out. The financial rot at the center of the perfect family was exposed. Darlene went pale. She looked at Rory. Rory was studying his shoes. "Mom took out a loan," Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength. "She leveraged the property. And now she wants me to sign a document that transfers the liability to me so she can qualify for a board position." He looked at his mother. "I am not your co-signer, Mom, and I am not your assurance. I am your son. But you stopped treating me like a son a long time ago. Now I am just an asset to you." Darlene stood there, stripping naked in front of her guests. The shame was absolute. But then, the shame turned to rage. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She exploded. "You ungrateful child!" she screamed. The sound was primal. It shattered the polite silence of the holiday. "Do you know what I sacrificed?" she roared, advancing on him. "Do you know what I did to keep this family respected? Your father was weak. He would have lost everything. I held it together. I charmed the bankers. I hosted the parties. I kept the name clean. She gestured wildly at the house, at the furniture, at the trappings of her life. I did this for you, and you let this nobody come in and ruin it? She pointed at me. She is nothing. Ethan, she comes from nothing. She does not understand what it takes to maintain a legacy. It wasn't about love. It had never been about love. It was about maintenance. It was about the curation of an image. We were just employees in the business of Darlene Crowley, Inc., and we had dared to quit. I watched her scream. I watched the spit fly from her mouth. I watched the veins bulge in her neck, and I felt peace, because everyone saw it. Rory saw it. Maris saw it. The Millers saw it. The instability wasn't mine. It was hers. When she finally ran out of breath, the silence that followed was heavy and final. "Are you done?" Ethan asked quietly. Darlene heaved a breath. She looked around the room, realizing too late that she had gone too far. She tried to compose her face, tried to pull the mask back up, but it was shattered. "I was just," she stammered. I looked at Ethan. "It is time." He nodded. I took my phone out. I texted Tessa, "Bring him down. We are leaving." We waited by the front door. The minutes stretched out, but no one moved to stop us. The guests were paralyzed, witnessing the wreckage of a dynasty. Tessa came down the stairs holding Owen's hand. Owen was wearing his headphones. He looked happy. He hadn't heard a thing. "Thanks, Tess," I whispered. Tessa hugged me. It was a fierce, desperate hug. "Take him," she whispered. "Just go." We opened the front door. The cold night air rushed in, cleansing the house of its stifling heat. I turned back one last time. Darlene was standing in the center of the living room. She looked small. She looked old. She was surrounded by the beautiful things she had prioritized over her family, and she was utterly alone. "Thank you for dinner." "Darlene," I said. It was the cruelest thing I could have said. It was polite. It was civilized. It was the one thing she couldn't reciprocate. "We will continue this conversation later," I added, with clarity. And with counsel, I stepped out onto the porch. The door didn't slam behind us. Ethan closed it gently. The click was soft, but it sounded like the closing of a coffin lid. We walked to the car. The gravel crunched. The wind blew. We got in. Ethan started the engine. "Mom?" Owen asked from the back seat, pulling off his headphones. "Did we have dessert?" "No. Buddy," I said, buckling my seatbelt. "We skipped dessert. Can we get ice cream on the way home?" I looked at Ethan. He was wiping his eyes, but he was smiling. It was a real smile, weak but genuine. "Yeah," Ethan said. "We can get ice cream. We can get whatever we want." As we drove down the long, winding driveway, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I knew what was happening inside. I knew the whispers were starting. I knew Rory Weller was already drafting his resignation from the Darlene fan club. I knew the bank would be calling on Monday. The carefully curated facade had cracked. And through the cracks, the light was finally getting in. We turned onto the main road, the darkness swallowing the estate behind us. The knot in my stomach was gone. In its place was a fierce, burning pride. I had walked into the lion's den. I had refused to roar, and I had walked out with my family whole. But I knew Darlene. I knew the silence wouldn't last. She was down, but she wasn't dead. And a woman who believed she had sacrificed everything for a legacy would not let it go without one final, desperate clawing at the earth. I checked my phone. One last text from Celeste. "Celeste, I found the name of the lender. It is a shell company. Hazel. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." I put the phone away. Let it get ugly. I thought, we are ready. The Tuesday following Thanksgiving broke with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Rain hammered against the windows of the conference room in Alder Ridge, a fictional city 40 miles west of Briar Glen, where anonymity was easier to purchase. We sat at a long, glass-topped table that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. Across from us sat Celeste Marin and a man named Marcus Vance, a real estate attorney with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen every variation of family betrayal imaginable. Mr. Vance slid a thick document across the glass. It made a heavy sliding sound that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "This is a draft of the document your mother was likely preparing," Vance said. His voice was gravelly and devoid of emotion. "Based on the file titles you saw and the lean search Celeste conducted, we constructed a probable scenario." Ethan reached out and touched the paper. His hand was trembling. He looked like a man who had not slept in 4 days. The circles under his eyes were dark purple, a physical manifestation of the grief he was trying to process. "Read the highlighted section," Vance instructed. Ethan looked down. "Guarantor assumes full liability for all principal and interest immediately upon default of the primary borrower." Ethan read aloud. His voice cracked on the word liability. Vance nodded. "The shell company holding the lien on the cabin is a predatory lender. High interest, short terms. They specialize in distressed assets. If you had signed that document, Ethan, you would not have just been helping with tax paperwork. You would have been personally guaranteeing a loan that is already underwater." Ethan looked up, his face pale. "How much? Based on the county records?" Vance leaned back, tenting his fingers. "Roughly $300,000. The number hung in the air. $300,000. It was enough to bankrupt us. It was enough to take our home, our savings, and our future." "And she knew?" Ethan asked. The question was a whisper. Vance looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at me. "She knew the loan was coming due," Celeste said softly, "and she knew she could not refinance it on her own credit. She needed a fresh signatory, someone with assets and a steady income, someone who trusted her." Ethan closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "She was going to sell me," he whispered, "to save the cabin, to save her reputation." I corrected gently. "The cabin is just a symbol. Ethan, it is about the seat on the historical trust. It is about the image. If she loses the cabin, everyone knows she is broke. If she keeps it, she stays the queen of Briar Glen." Ethan pushed the paper away. It slid back across the glass. "I feel sick," he said. I reached under the table and took his hand. His grip was weak, defeat radiating from his skin. "This is why we left," I said. "This is why we are here." The meeting lasted another hour. We discussed exposure. We discussed protecting our own assets. Vance advised us to lock down our credit, to notify our banks, and to draft a formal letter stating that Ethan had no knowledge of or liability for the Crowley estate debts. When we walked out into the rainy street, the air felt cleaner than the air inside Darlene's house. We drove home in silence. When we walked into our living room, our messy, imperfect living room with toys scattered on the rug and a pile of laundry on the sofa, Ethan collapsed onto the couch. He stared at the ceiling. "I spent 30 years trying to make her happy," he said. 30 years. Hazel. I ate the food I hated. I wore the clothes she bought. I dated the girls she approved of. Until I met you. And even then, I tried to make you fit her mold. I sat down next to him. You did. I said, I didn't sugarcoat it. I thought if I was just good enough, if I was just obedient enough, she would finally be satisfied, he said. I thought there was a finish line. There is no finish line with a narcissist. Ethan, I said, there is only the next hoop. He turned his head to look at me. Tears were leaking from the corners of his eyes. I am sorry, he said. I am so sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I know. I said. I squeezed his hand. But you protected me when it mattered. You walked out. I am not asking you to choose. Ethan, I continued, I will never ask you to disown your mother. That is too much to ask of anyone. But I am setting boundaries. Hard ones. Name them, he said. No private meetings. I listed, ticking them off on my fingers. If you see her, I am there, or a lawyer is there. No signatures. Ever. Not for a birthday card. Not for a package. Certainly not for a legal document. And no holidays under her roof. Not until she acknowledges what she did. Ethan nodded. He didn't hesitate. Done, he said. And one more. What? "We changed the locks on our house," he said. "She has a spare key. I gave it to her 5 years ago." I felt a chill. I hadn't even thought of that. "Change them," I agreed. Today, the next day, the evidence arrived. It came in the form of a text message from Tessa. My sister-in-law had been quiet since Thanksgiving, likely hiding in her own bunker to avoid Darlene's fallout. But she had been digging. Tessa. I found this on her iPad. She synced her voicemails to the cloud. "You need to hear this." I clicked the audio file. It was dated 2 days before Thanksgiving. It was a voicemail Darlene had left for herself. A voice memo she recorded while driving. Perhaps to remember a thought. The audio was grainy, filled with road noise, but Darlene's voice was unmistakable. "Make sure Maris sits next to her." Darlene's voice said, "Ask about the job. Push on the stress. If we can get her to snap, if we can get her to yell in front of Rory, then the story holds water. Unstable. Then Ethan will have to listen. He will sign if he thinks he needs to protect the assets from a divorce. Just need a little push." I replayed it. Just need a little push. She had planned it. It wasn't just passive-aggressive behavior. It was a tactical strike. She wanted a divorce. She wanted me to have a meltdown so she could convince Ethan that I was a liability, thereby scaring him into signing over his rights to protect himself. I played it for Ethan. He listened to it 3 times. He didn't cry this time. His face hardened. The last vestiges of the confused little boy vanished, replaced by the cold resolve of a man who realizes his mother is a predator. "She wanted to destroy our marriage," Ethan said, "to pay off a loan. She wanted to destroy me." I said, "You were just the collateral damage." Ethan stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at our street. "She is not my mother anymore," he said. "She is just a woman I used to know." In the week that followed, the shockwaves of our exit began to crack the foundation of Briar Glen. Small towns run on gossip, and Darlene Crowley had always controlled the narrative. But this time, the story was splitting. Darlene was telling everyone who would listen that I had suffered a nervous episode and dragged her son away. She painted a picture of a tragic Thanksgiving ruined by my mental fragility. But Maris Bexley wasn't playing along. I ran into Maris at the grocery store in the organic produce aisle. I tried to turn my cart around, but she waved me down. "Hazel," she said. "Maris." She looked tired. She wasn't wearing her usual pristine makeup. "I resigned from the committee," she said abruptly. I stopped. "You did?" I told Darlene I could not in good conscience serve alongside her. Maris said. She paused, picking up a lemon and examining it. "I told the pastor what happened. I told him about the script. You didn't have to do that." I said, "Yes, I did." Maris said, "I have a grandson about Owen's age. When I saw you with him, when I saw how you protected him, I realized I was on the wrong side." She put the lemon down. "People are talking. Hazel, not everyone believes her version anymore. The biggest blow, however, came from the town council. On Thursday, the Briar Glen Gazette ran a short article on page 4. Councilman Rory Weller calls for audit of community funds. The article didn't name Darlene, but it mentioned concerns regarding the allocation of resources within the historical trust, and stated that Mr. Weller was reevaluating the leadership criteria for the upcoming term. It was a bureaucratic way of saying, Darlene is out. Rory had seen the instability. He had seen the desperation, and rumors of the lien must have reached him, likely through Kent, or perhaps Celeste's inquiries had triggered flags at the county clerk's office. Darlene's legacy was crumbling. The very thing she had sacrificed her family to protect was slipping through her fingers like sand. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I realized I had to go back. Not to reconcile, not to fight, but to close the loop. We had left in a hurry, in the chaos. I had left something behind. Not a coat, not a bag, but the pie plate. The ceramic dish that Owen and I had used to bake the apple pie she had hidden in the pantry. It was a small thing, a trivial thing, but it belonged to us, and leaving it there felt like leaving a piece of our dignity in her possession. I told Ethan I was going. He offered to come, but I shook my head. No, I said, I need to do this. You stay with Owen. Keep him safe. I drove to Briar Glen on a Saturday morning. The sky was gray and hard, promising snow. The house looked different. The lawn was still perfect, the hedges still geometric, but the windows looked dark. The wreath on the door was slightly crooked. I parked in the driveway. I didn't knock. I still had my key. We had changed our locks, but she hadn't changed hers. I unlocked the front door and stepped in. The house was silent. It smelled of stale air and cleaning fluid. "Hello?" I called out. "Hazel?" The voice came from the sitting room. I walked in. Darlene was sitting in her wingback chair. She wasn't reading. She wasn't drinking tea. She was just staring at the wall. She looked smaller. Her hair was perfect, but her face was gaunt. The makeup couldn't hide the lines of stress that had etched themselves around her mouth. "You came back," she said. "I came for my pie plate." I said. She blinked. "Your pie plate?" "The blue ceramic one. You hid it in the pantry." Darlene let out a short, dry laugh. "You came all this way for a dish?" "It is my dish," I said, "and Owen made the crust." I walked past her into the kitchen. The house felt cold. I went to the pantry. The pie was gone, likely thrown out. But the dish was sitting on a high shelf. Washed and stacked. I took it down. I held it in my hands. It felt heavy and solid. When I walked back into the living room, Darlene was standing up. She looked shaky. "Hazel," she said. "Wait." I stopped. I didn't turn fully toward her. I gave her my profile. I have been thinking," she said. Her voice wavered. "I have been thinking about what happened. I waited. I'm sorry that things got so heated," she said. "I am sorry that you felt attacked. That was never my intention. I care so much. Sometimes my passion for this family comes across as intensity. It was the classic non-apology. I am sorry you felt that way. I am sorry I was too loving." I turned to face her. "Stop," I said. She froze. "Do not apologize for my feelings, Darlene, and do not frame your abuse as passion." "Abuse?" she gasped, clutching her pearls. "Hazel, that is a strong word. It is the right word." I said, "You tried to gaslight my husband. You tried to defraud him. You tried to alienate my son. And you tried to destroy my reputation. That is not passion. That is malice." Darlene's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the angry tears of Thanksgiving. They were the tears of a woman who realized her tricks weren't working. "I am all alone. Hazel," she whispered. "Rory won't return my calls. The committee is meeting without me. Kent says he is busy every time I reach out. I said nothing. I just want my family back." She pleaded. "I want Ethan. I want to see Owen. Can't we just start over? I will cook a dinner. Just us. No guests. No politics. Please." She took a step toward me. She looked pathetic, and for a second, just a split second, I felt that old tug of guilt, the societal programming that says we must forgive our elders, that we must keep the peace. But then I remembered the voicemail. Just need a little push. I remembered the plastic cup. I remembered the look on Owen's face when he asked if he was in trouble. I tightened my grip on the pie plate. "No," I said. Darlene stopped. "We are not starting over," I said, "because you haven't changed. You are just lonely, and you are broke. Hazel, please." I looked her in the eye. I spoke the words one last time, but I didn't say them with anger. I didn't say them with triumph. I said them with the quiet finality of closing a book. "We are done performing for your approval." Darlene flinched. "And here's the new reality," I continued. "If you want to see Ethan, you call him. If he answers, that is his choice. But you do not call me. You do not call Owen. And if you ever try to use my son as a pawn again." I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "I will not just walk out. I will burn your reputation to the ground. I have the voicemail. Darlene, I have the texts, and I will send them to Rory Weller myself." Darlene went pale. She knew I meant it. I turned and walked to the door. "Hazel," she called out, desperate. You cannot do this. I am his mother. I opened the door. I walked out. I didn't hear the door close this time. I left it open. Let the cold air in. Let the reality settle into the beige carpets and the chopped pillows. I drove home. When I pulled into our driveway, Ethan was outside. He was raking leaves with Owen. They were laughing. Owen jumped into a pile of leaves, scattering them everywhere. Ethan picked him up and spun him around. They looked happy. They looked light. I got out of the car. Holding the pie plate, Ethan saw me. He stopped spinning Owen. He put him down and walked over to me. "Did you get it?" he asked. I held up the blue dish. "I got it." "How was she?" he asked. I looked at the dish, then at him. "She is exactly who she is." I said, "And we are free of her." Ethan nodded. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. "She just called me," he said. I tensed. "And?" I didn't answer. He said, "I sent a text." "What did you say?" He showed me the screen. "Ethan, Mom, we are taking a long break. Do not come over. Do not call Hazel. If you have financial matters to discuss regarding the cabin or the trust, please direct them to Mr. Vance. His number is attached." I looked at the text. It was polite. It was firm. It was final. "Mr. Vance?" I asked, smiling. Ethan smiled back. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years. A smile unburdened by the weight of his mother's expectations. "I figured we should keep it professional," he said, "since I'm just an asset." Owen ran over to us. Leaves stuck in his hair. "Mom, did you see the pile? It is huge." "I saw it, baby," I said, reaching down to brush a leaf from his cheek. "Can we make another pie?" he asked. "Since we have the plate back?" I looked at the blue ceramic dish. It was just a thing, but it was our thing. "Yes," I said, "we can make 100 pies." We walked into our house. We closed the door. We locked it with the new deadbolt, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel the ghost of Darlene Crowley standing in the corner, judging the dust on the baseboards. The silence in the house wasn't heavy. It was empty. It was waiting to be filled with our noise, our mess, and our lives. We had stopped performing, and the show was finally, mercifully, over. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark corners of family dynamics, where control often masquerades as love. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with a family member to protect your peace? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We explore the complex, emotional, and sometimes triumphant moments when people finally stand up for themselves. Thank you for your time, and remember, your dignity is never a price you have to pay for someone else's comfort.